Good morning, everybody. Welcome to the PT on Ice Daily Show. It is an exciting day here on the podcast for two reasons. Number one, it is Fitness Athlete Friday, and that is the best day of the week, as you already know, here on the Daily Show podcast. But number two, this is episode number 1951 of the Daily Show, and we're about to make some rather large adjustments to the podcast in case you haven't already heard, and that is that the Daily Show will be moving exclusively to the Ice Physio app. So if you love checking in on these short, actionable, clinically focused podcasts on a daily basis, make sure you're on the Ice Physio app, which is where we are moving the Daily Show podcast. And now here on whatever platform you're listening podcast wise, we will start putting out more long form content on a slightly less frequent basis there, but please make sure you are on the Ice Physio podcast so you can stay up to date with what our faculty members are bringing to you to help improve your clinical practice. Today, I am really excited about this episode. It's something that I have been thinking about a lot lately since reading one specific research study, and it's something that I've been implementing in my practice quite a bit with my CrossFit athletes and my Olympic weightlifters, and I think it's going to help you out quite a bit with that population. And that is the topic of if athletes should be lifting lighter weights when they want to focus on improving their Olympic weightlifting. And so we're going to review one study and then talk about some research that was done in the USSR's, Soviet Union's Olympic weightlifting team back in the 80s. So before we dive into that research, just big picture viewpoint of the Olympic lifts. These are highly, highly technical movements. When we practice the Olympic lifts, we want to do those fresh and get a lot of positive attempts and very few failed repetitions. Now, I know in CrossFit at times we throw Olympic lifts in under fatigue. But what I'm saying is when you're trying to improve your maximal strength on the Olympic lifts and you're trying to improve your technique, you want to do that when you're fresh. So if you ever go to an Olympic weightlifting gym, or you go watch an elite Olympic lifter's like full training session on YouTube, one thing you'll notice is that they'll do a pretty low repetition set of their clean and jerk or their snatch, and then they will rest for multiple minutes because they want to be sure that they are really fresh before that next set, because motor learning happens better when you're not under as much fatigue. And so when your goal is improving technical proficiency, more rest is often better, and you want a lot of successful lifts. You don't want to have a lot of failures. So just keep that in mind. The study that I want to talk about is called The Effects of Low Load, High Repetition Resistance Training on Maximal Muscle Strength and Muscle Damage in Elite Weightlifters, a preliminary study. So here's what the authors of this study did. They had 18 male weightlifters that were members of the Korean national weightlifting team. So all of these men had more than 8 years of experience in Olympic weightlifting. So we're talking people that have really solid technique and years of practicing these movements. And they split them into three different groups. One group did something that we don't see happen a ton in the Olympic weightlifting world. They performed low load, high repetition sets, or high repetition workouts rather. So they were lifting as low as 30% of their one rep max, but no heavier than 60% of their one rep max. So a lot lighter than what we typically see that population hitting. Another group did more traditional lifting. So they were doing heavy loads with lower repetitions in terms of their total volume. So they were lifting loads between 60 and 90% of their one rep max. And then finally, there was a combined group. Now, one important note here, because this was a preliminary study and there were only 18 participants in those three groups, there are only 6 people per group. So that is definitely one of the limitations of this study. But they followed that loading protocol for 8 weeks. And they tested a number of different hormone levels and things like that. But what we really care about here is that they tested these athletes' back squat and snatch strength, as well as their body composition. So they're looking at skeletal muscle mass and body fat there. And very interesting here, because typically we know that research says that low loads taken to failure can create a hypertrophy effect, but we really know that strength is pretty specific. You need to be lifting heavier weights if you want to get stronger. But what they actually found in this study was that the low load, high volume group, quote, demonstrated comparable muscle mass and strength adaptations to the heavy load, high repetition training group. So not what you'd expect. You would not think that people that were elite lifters already, 8+ years of experience on the national team, can lift loads 30 to 60% of their 1 rep max in movements like the back squat, the front squat, clean and jerk, push press, Romanian deadlift, snatch, and behind the neck push press. Like normal movements that we would see Olympic lifters train, but at a drastically lighter weight, we would not expect to see them improve their skeletal muscle mass or their strength on those lifts. But that's what we saw in this research study, which I think is really cool for us from a rehab perspective. So I have a patient right now. She's getting ready to compete at nationals, and she has injured her wrist really badly. So significant amount of pain, 6 weeks out from this very important competition to her. And she can't catch heavy jerks or snatches overhead because of that pain right now. So anything above 50 or 60% of her 1 rep max becomes too painful to be tolerated. So this was a cool research study for me to have in mind as I'm working with her on her programming to keep her in the gym. I actually printed this out and gave it to her because she's a bit of a research nerd herself. She works in the medical world, and she was highly encouraged by it. Just seeing the simple fact that she could continue to lift low loads on her snatches and her clean and jerks and maintain her technical proficiency. In fact, maybe even improve it because she's getting so many reps at a weight that she knows that she can move with phenomenal form. And then she's going to do her squats and snatch pulls and Romanian deadlifts and movements like that that don't challenge the wrist. She's doing those heavier. So she's kind of in that combined group protocol almost here. Heavy loading on the things that don't bother her wrist, lighter loading, more volume to keep her technical proficiency up in the lifts that matter to her so that she can continue to train this close to a very important competition. So I really love that research study from that perspective of giving us some wiggle room when our athletes are injured to just say, okay, we're going to keep the weight light, but we're going to do more reps. And we're still going to see a lot of positive benefits in your training over the next few weeks. Because really, when it comes to injuries in the fitness athlete, the key for them is that they want to be in the gym doing the things that they love. And the best thing you can do as a medical practitioner is show them ways to stay in the gym. Now, I want to review a couple of the limitations of this study because I think they're important. We already addressed that there's only 6 people per group in this preliminary study. So maybe if they did a larger study, they might find some different findings. It was only 8 weeks long. So do I think you could have somebody, for 4 years only train these really light Olympic lifts and continue to see their progress happen? No. But for a short block of training, can it be beneficial? I think so. Then the other limitation that I really hated this about the study is that they didn't talk about the specific sets and reps that each group performed. Like I want to know the group that lifted when they went into snatch and one group's doing 80%. Did they hit 5x3 at 80% and the other group did 15 sets of 3 or did they do 3 sets of 10? Like I really would love to know that. That was kind of disappointing that they didn't have that in their research study there. But it was a really cool one to read and check out. One other thing that I read years ago that I pulled back up after reading this study that I think is worth noting is in the book, The Science and Practice of Strength Training by Zetsorsky. They have a really cool chart in there. It's a pie chart. And that pie chart is the distribution of loads lifted by the Soviet Union's Olympic weightlifting team in, I believe it was the 1984 Olympic cycle. So they're looking at the best lifters in the world here because the Soviet Union at the time was really dominating that sport. And they actually looked at the loads that those athletes were lifting. And you might be surprised to hear this, but only 7% of their total repetitions were performed over 90% of their 1 rep max. 8% of their reps were performed at loads less than 60% of their 1 rep max. But 85% of their lifts, so the vast majority of lifts, were performed between 60 and 90% of those athletes' 1 rep max. And that is something that I have talked to my clients about for such a long time, especially my CrossFit clients. When I saw that, my brain instantly went to the key to strength work is to move a moderate load repeatedly, to get a lot of practice reps. And so imagine you walk into a CrossFit gym and that day's workout is 6 sets of 3 snatches. Your average CrossFitter walks in and looks at it. They get warmed up, and how they approach those 6 sets of 3 is often that they start at a really light weight and they build up to a maximum set of 3. So they're trying to build up and get to that 90+% for 3 repetitions. And what I think would be a better approach when we take into account the Soviet Union's research here and this other research study that we just suggested is that what we should do instead is encourage our clients to choose a moderate load and do those 6 sets of 3 at 70 or 75% of their 1 rep max and get 18 total repetitions. Perform with phenomenal form where they don't miss any repetitions. And I think if we adopt that approach, our motor learning will go up, our technical proficiency will go up. And in the Olympic lifts, they are so much about technical proficiency, especially the snatch, even more so than the clean and jerk. But if you think about your personal deadlift 1 rep max, and you compare that to what you snatch, or you compare your front squat or back squat weight to your snatch, your front squat, your back squat, your deadlift are all dramatically more weight than your snatch. Your snatch is more limited by your technical proficiency and your ability to get under that bar with the right form than it is how strong you are. More repetitions that are positive attempts and not failed is going to be what's best for you there. Hope that gives you some thoughts to use with your clients, both to help improve their performance as well as to help them when they are injured to reduce the load so that you're not aggravating injuries anymore, but you're keeping them in the gym. If you want to dive more into how to keep athletes in the gym, how to understand technical proficiency of these lifts so that you can help your clients out, then check out all the courses that we offer inside the fitness athlete division. We've got our level 1 and 2 online course, and then our live courses where we travel around the country, helping you all understand the specific needs of the fitness athlete. And we look forward to seeing you in those courses. Hope you have a great day. Make sure you jump onto the Ice Physio app so that you can continue to listen to the daily show.